This podcast contains explicit content and is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Don't say we didn't warn you.
Hi, my name is Madison.
I'm Hannah,
And you are listening to Who's Knocking?
a true crime podcast.
Welcome. Today we're doing part 2 of the Unabomber case. And heads up, this is going to be part 2 of 3.
Okay.
Because there was a lot of shit.
There really is a lot.
So, yeah, I tried to get through the whole manifesto. We're going to talk about the manifesto in the next episode.
Okay.
Just to warn everybody now.
So homework, read the manifesto.
Yeah, well, really, if you feel so inclined, it's kind of long.
It's
not like
interesting.
crazy long. It's not like,
It's
a whole
crazy
book,
long.
but it is a whole book.
It is crazy long. Read just like the first page. It's already interesting. And then if you lose interest like me, at least you got the first page.
Yeah, it's interesting, but
It starts off with a bang. Like it starts off like, oh yeah, this is really, really interesting. And then after a while, I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
attention
that's
span.
true. The first couple pages, I was like, yeah, that's kind of cool. And
Yeah,
then,
yeah.
Then I was like, okay, you're ranting now.
Yeah, exactly.
You like the sound of your own voice or of your own
Typed voice.
typewriter.
Yeah.
So what's new?
With me?
Yeah.
Not much.
What's new with me?
Yeah, tell us.
I started pottery class again.
Okay.
It's very exciting.
We
Very
do
fun.
love your pottery.
I do love making pottery. I'm really not good at it.
You're good at it.
We had to make like handmade stuff.
Oh.
We're starting like 2 classes of one. The first thing we did was coil building,
Okay.
which is where you make like roll out coils and like
And you make a
build
snake?
a pot up
Oh, you built a pot.
or like whatever, but with coils, and then you can smooth it out.
That's cool.
And it looks really easy, but it's really not.
Oh.
Mine look like garbage. And then this like girl next to me was like, yeah, I'm not very good. It's my first class. And I was like, oh, I've done like 3 classes. She's like, oh, cool. And then she like makes these like beautiful mugs. And I'm like, ugh, I made this like nasty bowl. The wheel is better because like even if it's like, it's just easier to make things kind of symmetrical if you get the hang of like centering it properly. It's all about like
I
if
like
you
the
center
pottery
it.
you make.
Yeah,
My dogs broke one of your pieces though.
This is one of my. These are just 2 of my pieces
Yeah.
up there. They're okay.
Nice.
There's a mug up there, but yeah, I've had so many nice bowls, and like Isla broke all of them.
Yeah, my dogs broke one of my favorite ones that you made. My dogs broke.
So I'll have to make some
Pretty
more.
rude.
That's exciting in my life. Next week, I will have a announcement.
Okay.
I'm gonna make it on the 50th episode because next week is our 50th episode.
That's exciting.
Which
and your announcement is also exciting.
Yeah, I literally can't believe that we almost have 50 episodes.
Yeah,
That's
almost a year.
insane
also.
to me. I guess 52 will be
Yeah.
a year, but 52 will land us on. I feel like it's because we launched on October 6th of last year. I remember it because it's my friend's birthday. Taylor, shout out, happy birthday. But I feel like this 52nd episode is not going to take us to October 6th.
Maybe it will. It might.
3 weeks from now, we're not even in September.
Yeah. That's true.
So something doesn't add up there. I don't know if we're counting bonus episodes, but whatever. It is going to be our 50th episode.
Yeah.
And that's pretty special. We are almost at 200 YouTube subscribers. So if you're not subscribed, that would be pretty dope
Please
if
do
you
that.
subscribe. If like 8 of you did that, and then we'd have 200 YouTube subscribers.
Yep.
And that would be more than the 192 we have now.
That'd be cool. Tell your friends.
Yeah. So look out next week for my big special announcement. I've been working on a project.
I know what it is. And it is exciting.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it. I think it'll be fun. But I'm teasing it now just because people do that.
Yeah.
And I want to. So I think we'll just get into it.
Okay.
Couldn't think of any like good news situations this week.
Yeah.
Other than Salman Rushdie got stabbed 1 million times. That was fucked.
I don't know what happened.
He was at some speaking event in the States. I don't know where in the States. It might have been New York. And someone just rushed at him and stabbed him a bunch of times.
Why?
And now he's in the hospital clinging for his life.
Oh my God.
Well, because he had a patois on his head. Like, but I don't know. The Iran is saying like, oh, we didn't do it. But it's like, he's been on the lam for a long time because, not on the lam, but
That's fucked up.
he's had that over his head for a really long time.
That's crazy.
So the poor freaking guy.
Yeah, that's really sad.
So that sucked. I hope he's okay.
Yeah.
But let's get into the Unabomber case, because that's what we're doing this week.
Yep. Our boy Ted.
Yeah, our boy Ted.
Not our boy, though.
Not our boy. He's we'll
My
talk.
boy.
We'll talk more at the next episode of like our like opinions on him as like a person.
Yeah, because it was brought to my attention that I might have been a little bit too nice to him last time.
It's possible. I mean, I think there's a lot of people on the internet who like really stand for Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah.
I feel like me being like, I'm not a fan of this guy is going to get me in trouble.
We'll see.
Because people really like him. Yeah. But anyway, let's get into it. Okay. So I made a little note on, so last week, should I give a generous recap?
Please. That would be so nice of you.
I didn't write one, but let's see. So we learned about Ted Kaczynski when he was born. The most prevalent piece of his childhood was the fact that he had that allergic reaction and went to the hospital for quite a while when he was 9 months old and was separated and isolated from his family. And after that, he seemed to be a bit of a changed person. Super intelligent and smart in elementary school, skipped some grades, did not do well for him socially. Went to Harvard at age 16 and while there underwent he was involved in a study, and some people think that it was an MK Ultra study, but evidence doesn't seem to support it, but it does seem sketch.
Seems possible, but not necessarily likely.
Yeah, and even Ted claims it was a lot less intense than everybody else portrays it.
Okay.
However, anyway, so he was part of that, and a lot of people think that affected him. And then he ended up going to University of Michigan and to get a master's or PhD or whatever, higher education. And then he started working at University of California, Berkeley. And there, like partway through that job, he resigned and then decided to go live in a cabin in Montana.
Yep.
And just as he was, what I want to talk about, just before he left the University of Michigan, he was like, I think I need to change my sex because I feel
I forgot about that.
The sex change thing.
I've never heard about that.
Yeah, and then he went to a psychiatrist and then was like, never mind, I don't want to do this. I was just saying that because I didn't want to get drafted. And then he got super angry about that whole situation, and many people think that was the catalyst because that's where he was like, I want revenge on all these people. And then he took off to the cabin in the woods.
I totally forgot about that.
So a little note on that. So I've been watching the documentary series called The Unabomber in His Own Words, and I feel like that's a pretty good source. His family is interviewed in that series, and there's one journalist, a woman, who like sat down with him and taped him, and so there's like he's kind of narrating the whole thing. Okay. So it's a lot like things in his own words, and like people like FBI people who were there, journalists who were there at the time, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that that's a decent source.
Yes.
And in that documentary, they described, they say that Ted's desire for the sex change, misguided as it was, is thought to have come from his desire to be with a woman because he had never been with a woman.
Interesting.
And a lot of people believe that is when he decided that he wanted to start killing people. And in his diary, he noted, quote, "I will kill, but I will make at least some effort to avoid detection so that I can kill again," end quote.
That was in his diary?
In his diary. He has a very long diary.
I like that it's a diary and not a journal.
No, it's
Michael Scott's diary.
Dear diary. So like the most like crazy part about that quote is that he's already saying that he wants to kill multiple times.
Fucked.
There's a lot of people, and some psychiatrist or some mental health person noted that's like there's a lot of people who like think about killing people or like, you know, have those thoughts or whatever, and then they try it and they're like, ooh, gross. But it's like a lot. It's like that's what separates the serial killers from just the fucked up people when they kill somebody and then are like, oh, I liked that, like let's do that again. And he's like he hasn't even killed anyone, but he's like, I want to kill multiple people.
I never knew that.
Fun.
Did he say why in his diary?
He was really upset about the whole sex change incident.
Right.
And I think he just it's like he got embarrassed by himself or something, and something about it made him so angry and so angry at the people around him. And there's another famous quote, which I think I said in the last episode, where he's like, I rise like a phoenix. And like he basically says that this situation changed his whole perspective. And that's when he knew that he wanted to seek out revenge on people in the form of like killing them.
So fucked up.
So pleasant.
Wow.
Also, I think I mentioned in the last episode that when he took a brief hiatus from his life in the cabin to go work at the factory. Yeah. And that factory that he worked at, his dad worked at it, and his brother was a supervisor there, and it was his brother who had to fire him. And what it was he went on a couple dates with this girl, then she was like, oh, I just want to be friends, like not super into you. And so then he wrote all these really nasty limericks about her and posted them all over the factory.
Aggressive poetry.
Yeah. And I didn't know for sure in the last episode like how everybody saw them, but it's because he just put them everywhere.
That's such an immature and bad look.
Yeah, well, it's insane.
It's like there's no Facebook, so he just had to
literally post them everywhere.
Okay.
And so then after that whole situation, he went out and he waited in his car while she was at work, and he decided that he wanted to kill her and mutilate her. Wow. But then at the end of the day, he decided against it.
That's really fucked up.
Yeah,
I never knew that about him.
He was so angry at her and I guess it was probably the first time he'd ever been rejected, because I don't think he'd ever made an advance at a woman, right? Wow. And so also, I didn't really put this in anywhere, but there was somebody also who made a comment in the documentary. So like he never had sex with a woman, and so they were like, we think that, and it's obviously we don't know, but they're like, we think that like for him, like the act of making the bombs was like sexual in nature for him. Crazy. It's like he like got off on like putting them together.
I mean, you could say anything's probably sexual in nature.
I know. But... And I think like psychiatrists love to be like, oh, it was sexual. Yeah. Like he was like sexually into it. It's like,
that's very, very psychoanalysis. Okay.
But interesting theory.
That's interesting, yeah.
So that is the notes on the last episode.
Okay. That was a really, really nice recap. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
And so that whole incident seemed like the catalyst that drove him. And that is when he started... so before, and I told you about all the like vandalizing and like shitting in the people's tubs. Yes. And like that's when he was like, okay, no, I want blood. Right. And so it was actually while he was still in Chicago in 1978 where he mailed his first bomb. Okay. So the first bomb, it showed up in the Northwestern University parking lot. Okay. The return address was to a professor at a technological institute, and it had not been mailed. But this one was never actually mailed. It was just left in a parking lot.
Oh, he just left it in the parking lot. Okay.
Yeah, and so like somebody just picked it up. Ooh. And it went off, but it didn't kill anybody.
Did it injure anybody?
Yes. But not like it was his shittiest bomb that I ever sent, because they kind of all got better from there. Like this was like not much of much. Okay. And when the investigators later reconstructed the scene and the package, they realized that the package would not have fit in the mailbox, which is probably why it never got mailed.
So he personally put it there.
Yeah, he probably got to the mailbox and was like, shit, it doesn't fit. And it was just like, okay, I'll just leave it here. Great. So fair. It was picked up by a security officer at the university. It only partially detonated and did cause minor injuries. Okay. The bomb, as I said, was not very sophisticated or very powerful at all.
How did he learn how to make bombs?
He spent his time, what we know is that he was living in the woods and he would go to libraries.
Libraries, okay.
Like there was no internet at that time.
No, so exactly. That's why it had to be from books. How do you learn how to do stuff?
I know.
Internet, libraries, okay.
Yeah, I would assume like he was very into science. So I assume like he studied physics.
Yeah, it's probably not that hard to make explosives.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it looks kind of hard, but
just in terms of like, if you're smart.
Yeah.
If you're smart. If you know how to do that.
You're in that anyway. Yeah. So there it was, Ted's first attempted murder, and it of course did not work at all, or cause any death. So that was disappointing to him. And I think at this point, Ted knew it was unlikely that his first bomb would kill anyone, but definitely that was his goal. Right. That and the terror that he would cause the public. So Ted went back to his cabin in Montana, and there he would begin what would be a long 17 years of tinkering around with bomb designs. And he would find materials in garbages and other people's properties, or use the money that his mom would send him for medical expenses. In his diary, he labeled every bomb with an experiment number so that he could document the outcomes properly. And in his diary, he also devised a numerical code, which he wrote about all his criminal activity in code so that people couldn't figure it out.
Okay, smart guy.
But they did figure it out later. The second bomb was sent on May 9th, 1979, also to Northwestern. It was small and built inside of a cigar box, and it was left on a table. It did not actually go through the mail. It was left on a table, and someone did end up opening in it. It exploded. It injured that one person. This bomb was slightly more intricate than the previous one, and this time it had batteries and wires.
Okay.
The explosive mixture was a smokeless powder and match heads cut off of matches, and it was evident that this was still an amateur bomb maker. In his diary, Ted wrote that he had hoped the victim would have been blinded or would have had his hands blown off, or that something more would have happened.
That's crazy.
But again, disappointment. The third bomb was November 15th, 1979, and that package was actually sent through the mail. It ended up on an American Airlines flight.
Ooh. Wait, how did it end up on the flight?
Because it was flying the mail.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. And it was a flight 444 en route from Chicago, and it was designed to detonate by an altimeter, which is a device that measured altitude. So it was like once it got to a certain altitude, it would explode. That's pretty
sophisticated.
Yeah. And that was made out of a barometer.
Okay.
And this would set off the bomb, as I said, when the plane reached a certain altitude. And the bomb did explode in the mail pouch of the cargo hold, but it didn't cause that much harm.
That's good.
This bomb was more sophisticated than the last and was intended to cause vastly more harm, but luckily it didn't. And very luckily, nobody on the flight was harmed.
Yeah, seriously.
In Ted's coded diary, he wrote that the bomb was intended to blow up the whole flight, but shit, it was too weak. And it was this third bomb that got the attention of law enforcement and the American government, and they began to realize that there was a pattern, and they were like, shit, I think we have a serial bomber on our hands. Fuck.
Yeah, that's not good.
So at that time, the FBI set up a task force to take this guy down, and they gave him the name Unabomber, which came from University and Airline Bomber.
Right.
That's how they came up with the name.
Honestly, I bet he was proud of that name. Like, that's a pretty good name.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool name.
BTK is sitting at home being like, fuck, I want a name.
Yeah, like, I had to make one up myself. Loser.
Okay.
It was so funny. I was telling you that at my friend's bridal shower, like I met one of her other friends who was like, yeah, I listened to your podcast. And we just like sat around and we're like, yeah, BTK is such a loser, hey? Like,
yeah.
Just like how I just love to think of like how that would make him feel, of like all these like girls sitting around at a bridal shower talking about what a loser he is. Like,
honestly, he'd probably be happy just for the attention.
Would. Well, but it's like,
it's negative attention, but at least it's attention, you know?
I guess he likes attention, but like he also likes to think of himself as like,
if you recall, I would rather have attention and be hated than be irrelevant. So
that's true. Maybe he's like you.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this task force would eventually grow to more than 150 full-time investigators. Wow. It also had analysts and just a bunch of different people, and it included ATF members and members of the Postal Inspection Service. The fourth bomb happened on June 10th, 1980, and that package was sent to an executive at American Airlines by the name of Percy Wood.
Yep.
And that was in Lake Forest, Illinois. And it was made out of a hollowed-out copy of a book called Ice Brothers by Sloan Wilson. Oh. And in it, there was a letter and a book in the package, and then inside the book was the bomb.
I love a hollowed-out book.
We live for a hollowed-out book.
Yeah, that's cool.
But not with the bomb in
it.
With
exactly.
Like something cute.
Just like something cool.
Like money or my passport. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you have COVID?
Do I have COVID? No, I just have a dry throat. Maybe I have COVID.
Okay.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll just go on. Yeah. So then the letter said, "Dear Mr. Wood, I am taking, quote, Dear Mr. Wood, I am taking the liberty of sending you, under separate cover, a book which I believe to have great social significance. I am sending copies of this book, Ice Brothers by Sloan Wilson, to a number of prominent people in the Chicago area because I believe this to be truly a book of our time, a book that should be read by all who make important decisions affecting the public welfare. I realize that a man in your position does not have the time to read every book that is recommended to him, so that I may have wasted my time and money in sending you a copy of Mr. Wilson's work. But I feel sure that that it will be worth your while to at least glance through the book, since it is as entertaining as it is significant. Perhaps you will then decide to read the entire work. End quote. So really, he's just writing this letter, hoping that this guy opens the book.
Yeah.
And so Percy Wood opened the book, and it did go off. He was injured very badly. He had to undergo surgery to remove like a ton of shrapnel. That's how you say it?
Is that just like the pieces of the bomb?
Yeah. So a lot of the times, for people who don't know, inside of bombs, they'll have either be made of metal or there'll be like lots of metal scraps. And so like when those explode, they like just get you. And like this guy was just maimed with so many pieces of shrapnel is what it's called.
Yeah.
So yeah, he had to have surgery, but he did not die. Ted wrote in his coded diary that he felt better after this bomb since Percy had been hurt quite badly, but he was still angry that he did not die.
Wow. My like for Ted is just significantly decreasing as this goes on.
He's not nice.
That's awful.
He's really not nice.
No, that's not cool. Like just the fact that he's reveling in this is like, dude.
Hannah, he mailed like 17 bombs. Like, what?
I know, but I always pictured him as just being like some guy that's like, fuck the world. I'm just gonna screw the world over, instead of being like, I hope this person suffers.
Well, it's like there is certain people that he mails them all to specific people.
Yeah,
but he wants to like. He just wants to hurt people.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked up.
And like his larger goal is to take down the entire of society.
Right.
So in a sense, like he is saying that. And I think it's I don't think it's so much that it's like, I hate you specifically and I want you to die and I want you to suffer. But it's you represent this to the world and I want to take that down. And so I don't give a shit about your life at all.
Which is kind of more the perspective I had on him, like the way you're saying it, but the way he's saying it in his diary is like, I'm glad he was hurt.
Yes.
Like I wouldn't have thought he had that perspective. I would have thought he'd be like, I want to cause a stir and I don't care who gets hurt, which is still very shitty, versus being like, I like when people get hurt.
Yeah. Well, I think, and that's, I see exactly what you're saying, and I agree. I also kind of thought.
That's what I thought.
That I
didn't know about his diary.
But even like when I was telling you about like that whole sex change incident, like that's when he was like, I want to seek revenge on people who
I didn't know that
didn't like, basically.
Yeah.
And he wanted to, like that girl, for example, he wanted to mutilate her. That's is what he said. Up.
I had no idea about that part. That's fucked.
And I think people oftentimes really like what he wrote and like are
yes,
like extreme environmentalists or whatever, so, you know. And so they like that part, and then they kind of like glance over the rest of the stuff, and it's like,
but it's not that like. Shout out Wikipedia. I don't think this is on the Wikipedia article.
No. This is like...
So, like, for the people who do surface-level research, like myself, admittedly, and read the manifesto, it's kind of like, oh, like, he seems okay.
The documentary series I watched, that was not the only thing that I looked into, but that was, like, one of my main sources, and that goes pretty in-depth. And there's, like, a guy in it who like... met him and talked to him after the fact, and he's like, I love the manifesto, I agree with everything in it. But then he talked about seeing him at the trial and stuff, and he was like, Ted, like, you killed people, like, why don't you care? Cool, man. Yeah. So you know, two things can be true at once. Right. Like what he wrote people can like it, and people can like what he stands for,
art, but not like.
But also be like, yo, it's not cool to kill people, bro. You know. Yep. Even though his manifesto does explicitly talk about like. Doing anyway. Yeah, anyway, we'll get to the manifesto later.
So. Are you going to read the whole manifesto on air?
No.
That like exists. A 10-hour podcast.
That exists. Shout out Ben. It was he emailed me, and he sent me a link. Like you can, if you don't want to read it but you want to listen to it,
audiobook.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at this point, the FBI was getting super frustrated. Usually, like, the FBI just gets, like, all these tips and people, like, want to help or whatever, but there was nothing. Nobody was getting any tips. They didn't have any suspects, any lead. They were completely stumped. There was no forensics, nothing. Like,
yeah, this is a hard thing to trace. And didn't he put, like, somebody else's fingerprints on the...
It's something way worse.
Okay.
And it's hilarious. I think that's a mosquito. Get the
there a
fuck out of
bug?
here, mosquito. I hate mosquitoes so fucking much.
Yeah, they are
everything.
essentially evil on Earth.
Did you know that they're the most deadly animal on Earth?
You told me that.
Did I? I hate them so much.
They are pretty awful.
They love me. They love me. And everything I try to do, like I try to go to a cottage and enjoy a cottage, and they just attack me.
Madison.
Went to a beautiful wedding the other day, and they just ate at my
In
ankles.
Uxbridge, right?
Yeah.
There's so many mosquitoes in Uxbridge. I'm constantly covered.
There's so many mosquitoes everywhere.
Yeah.
I hate them. Anyway. Bomb number 5, October 8th, 1981, Salt Lake City at the University of Utah. The bomb was found by a maintenance worker at the university, and they were actually able to defuse the bomb before it went off,
Very cool.
which was cool. That was
How
great.
did they know how to do that?
I think so. He found it, and like it was obviously a bomb, and
Yeah.
then like they called in the bomb people who like know how to do that.
That's cool.
I don't know exactly how they do that, but
Yeah, that's a good skill.
there's like a bomb squad.
Yeah.
And that was great because it was able to provide actual extensive evidence. Because like when all the other bombs went off, like you could like kind of piece together what was happening. But this was like, this is how they made the bomb, the person, whatever. And they were like,
useful.
sweet, hopefully we'll get some forensics. They did not. But they were able to see how the bomb was constructed. It was a can of gasoline with a pipe bomb inside of it. And there was absolutely no forensic evidence on the bomb. Clearly, the maker of the bomb was sophisticated enough to know how to like avoid leaving fingerprints or DNA. Shittily enough for the FBI.
Right.
Bomb number 6. This was mailed to Patrick Fisher of Vanderbilt University, Tennessee. Fisher might be an interesting word to throw in there.
Yeah.
And this was on May 5th, 1982.
Is he just like looking through directories to find people whose names resemble nature? Like,
It's very, we don't know for sure because I don't think he said, but yeah.
Okay.
And so Patrick's secretary was injured because she was the one who opened it.
oh,
She was not killed. It was mailed from Utah, and it was another pipe bomb, so he'd done a pipe bomb before. But this was a much different design than the previous bomb. And detectives could tell that the Unabomber was still experimenting with his designs and getting better. Like
Okay.
He was learning every time. Bomb number 7 was July 2nd, 1982 at the University of California, Berkeley. This is a hard name.
okay, you got this.
Diogenes J. Angelikos was a professor of electrical engineering and computer sciences. He found the package on the floor of the faculty lounge, and the bomb went off and took all the flesh off of one of his hands.
That's horrifying.
Yeah, he did not die, but he was obviously maimed very badly. Ted wrote in his diary that he was getting frustrated so far that he had failed at making a lethal bomb. After the second 1982 bomb, which was that one, the Unabomber went quiet for quite a while.
Oh,
So here we see him holding back.
okay.
The Unabomber task force continued to analyze all the bombs and tried to get anything they could. There was absolutely no forensic evidence, no fingerprints, hairs, DNA of any kind. So that sucked for them. They were really hoping to find something, and they did not.
Do you know why he was holding off?
I think he was just experimenting with
Like trying
different
to make
bombs.
a better bomb.
And I don't know exactly, but we know like, so every bomb, as I said, had a number. And like we know, your hair's gotten really long.
Thanks.
When did that happen?
I don't know. Time.
Cool. So like I remember there was one person like in the documentary, there was one victim, and he's like, I know that my bomb was like bomb number 152. So I know that like there was only 16 bombs that got mailed out, but
Yeah.
he was at like in the hundreds.
He was just making tons
So
of
it's-
them at home.
Yeah, I think it's very possible that he was making bombs and he's like, this one's not good enough. This one's not good enough for like 6 years.
I guess he has nothing else to do.
Literally, he has nothing else to do.
That's
Nobody to see, no job to attend, nothing.
Yeah. I wonder if he was like letting off bombs in the woods. Like, I wonder if he was practicing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fucked.
I think that's definitely likely. So then, during his little hiatus.
Also, by the way, have you read his diary, or it was in the documentary?
No, I have not read there's 40,000 pages of his.
I bet.
And it's like all over the place. So I've just heard what I'm telling you. I've
Okay.
heard like other pieces of it, but I'm just.
I wonder what else he writes about.
He wrote about everything. He wrote about his day-to-day life. He wrote about like what he was doing. He wrote about.
What was he doing? Was
his
he like
bombs.
hunting and fishing and stuff?
He was like a lot of it. He talked about like so he would spend his time making bombs and stuff, but also like perfecting his like philosophy and his manifesto.
Right.
And he would spend all his time just like thinking about, because all the bombs and stuff were for the goal of his to like create a revolution, because he believed in his own theory of the world, which we'll get into. But so he spent all his time reading different like philosophers and other thinkers and like thinking about the environment and like researching into like what was going on and stuff.
That'll take up your time. I just want to know if he was like hunting. Like, how was he acquiring food?
I think he was growing food mostly. Like he would like go into town and like
It's so fucked up how he's like almost like a cool guy that lives off the grid.
Yeah, I never came across anything that said he was hunting, but it's
interesting. Like, what was he doing?
He had some homemade guns. He made guns.
That's kind of cool, I guess, depending on what
cool
you
to
use
like
them for.
make things. Not sure I want them in his hands, but yeah, it'd be cool if like you were just a hunter.
Yeah.
So during his hiatus, he spent all of his time experimenting with bombs, trying to create something truly lethal. Up to this point, he had sent 7 bombs in 7 years, and though he had injured people quite severely, he had yet to kill anyone. The 8th bomb was sent again to the University of California, Berkeley.
Okay.
This time to John Hauser on May 15th, 1985. John opened the package, and it injured his right hand and arm very badly. He lost the tops of all of his fingers.
Terrifying.
But luckily, he survived the attack.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, the bomber had left some little pieces of metal with the letters FC carved into them, or like etched into the metal.
I remember this.
And he planted those inside of many bombs, particularly starting in like 1980, 1981, and the 1982 bombs. So the FBI task force tried to decipher what FC meant. And it was like their first real clue, but they couldn't tell if it was a clue, if it was just a red herring. They knew this guy was pretty sophisticated, so the chance of it being just something to throw them off was very high. But they did get quite into this, and we'll get into more of it later. It does come up, but
okay, because I
at this point it was just a
like
dead
I
end.
remember this, and I remember like kind of what it stands for. I think.
Well, at this
But
point,
we don't know.
At this point, they had not figured it out, but later it's talked
Yeah,
about.
I kind of remember this part. It was to throw them off the trail, right?
No, actually, this was he did this intentionally to make it seem like he was someone else, basically.
I will wait in suspense for you to tell me what it is.
I'll get to it.
It wasn't TK, so it wasn't Ted Kaczynski.
No, he's not his own.
Imagine.
Bomb number 9 was June 13th, 1985, and this was a package that was discovered and disarmed at Boeing Company in Arbor, Washington. So that's an airline.
It's nice when they can disarm them.
Yes, it is. And it's really good evidence. But again, no forensics.
Yeah, he wiped them down, right? Like he didn't leave fingerprints.
He knew how not to
He's
leave
fucking
any
smart.
evidence. It's like there's no hairs left in the tape or whatever. There was no fingerprints. There was nothing.
Smart.
Number 10 was November 15th, 1985, and this package was sent from Utah to Professor James McConnell, a professor of psychology at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Okay.
His graduate student, Nicolau Suino, was the one to open the package and was injured quite badly when it exploded.
Ugh.
The FBI took note that this latest package was sent to a professor of psychology, and they figured that was probably significant.
Okay.
Now, if we recall, Ted did attend the University of Michigan after Harvard, and in his diary, investigators later found that he claimed to have some pretty awful experiences with some of the psychology professors there.
Really?
So, so this seems like a personal...
What were the experiences? They just weren't nice to him?
Yes, I think that some of so Ted claimed that he had some dreams that the psychologist said were evidence of him being mentally ill, basically.
I mean, like,
so they accurately diagnosed. They're like,
it's not them being mean.
You're a little bit fucked up, bro. And Ted thought that they were trying to control his mind, and this made him very angry and violent, apparently. Wow. He was clearly very unhappy at Michigan, and his time there was when he began to feel very depressed, isolated, and angry.
That's
sad. It's then, I think it was then that was the like sex change thing.
Right.
So bomb number 11 happened on December 11th of 1985 in Sacramento, California. This bomb was found by 38-year-old Hugh Scruton.
Okay.
The bomb was sitting on the ground in a paper bag outside of Hugh's computer store. When Scruton opened the bag, the bomb went off with such a force that it did end up killing him.
That's terrifying.
So Ted
had left this there physically.
Yes.
Okay.
And he had finally murdered his first person.
Wow.
In his diary, Ted wrote, quote, "Excellent, humane way to eliminate somebody. He probably never felt a thing," end quote.
Really?
Which is, it's like, you're trying to humanely kill someone? Like, that's not a thing.
That's not how that works. And I guess he heard it in the news or whatever that it successfully. Yeah.
And I don't know, like, because he physically put it there. So I don't know if he, like, stuck around. But
pretty suspect if he was just hiding there.
And the Unabomber was huge news at the time.
Yeah.
Like, it was huge news. So, like, he would know, right?
That's true.
Not that he had like a TV or anything, but like he would go to the library where he could see a newspaper,
right.
You know. And then it turned out that Hugh was actually a student at the University of California, Berkeley when Ted was teaching there.
Oh.
And so many people later speculated that Ted had known him and maybe had some sort of personal grudge against him. But also, this was a computer store that he left it out front of.
And he hates technology.
He was super anti-technology, which is why he also hit up computer stores.
Right.
After his first kill, Ted knew he had to be very careful. Obviously, this was now a huge deal since now there was murder on the table. So he went to so this is not the fingerprints that you were saying earlier. He knew that he had to be careful. So what he did, very smart.
Okay.
He went to a bus stop restroom and he collected a bunch of random pubic hairs to put in his next
Where
bra.
were they?
Just in the men's bath. I guess, I don't know.
Do men just shed pubes?
I guess men's bathrooms, they're just like out there. Just
everywhere?
like, you know, when they're peeing, they're just like, it's a great one. Like, let's I don't know. I don't know what guys
men
do. Men
weigh in.
Yeah. Tell us, men.
Is this what you guys do?
Are your bathrooms just littered with pubes?
It's just a carpet of all pubes.
Because he went in there, loaded
he's like,
his
all right,
pockets.
just grab a couple of these.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he got himself a bunch of pubes to put in his next bomb.
Did it have to be?
So that's what you were thinking when you were thinking of the fingerprints. No, it was pubes.
Yeah, I thought it was fingerprints. Okay.
So unnecessary. But anyway, that's what he did. Bomb number 12 was February 20th, 1987. Another bomb was found and in another computer store parking lot, and this time it was in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Right.
This device looked like a piece of wood with some nails sticking out of it. And a woman who worked at the store actually saw the person place it there. She, at the time, she was like, oh, somebody's putting something out there. Okay, whatever. And she never really thought of it. This bomb was picked up by Gary Wright, who was the owner of the computer shop. And he was injured very badly, but did survive.
Wow, okay.
And I guess he was also shot with a bunch of pubes, unfortunately.
God. What, so he survived and it wasn't?
He did.
Oh my God, the pubes.
He did get
and so Ted was spotted.
Yes. So that's the big thing with this one is there was an eyewitness. And so she helped to create a sketch of the Unabomber, which is a very famous sketch. You probably know it.
Yes, with the hoodie, right?
With the hoodie, yeah, and the aviators. And we'll put up a picture. They figured, and so she gave a description, which was white male, 5 foot, 10 inches tall, with reddish blonde hair. And he wore a hoodie with some aviator glasses.
Does he even have reddish blonde hair?
No, he has brown hair. So here's the thing.
Eyewitness testimony.
Exactly. Did you see the comment? So there was a comment on the last video, which, shout out, it's somebody who comments all the time. Rusty is the name, I think. But he was like, why I thought eyewitness testimony is good. Eyewitness testimony is not reliable.
It can be helpful, but it's not like a straight science.
And I in the comment, I put a link to a Psychology Today article that does a pretty good rundown of why eyewitness testimony is not reliable. And it's basically just because the human memory is not perfect. When we test this on yourselves, think about who you had lunch with yesterday and try to say what they were wearing and then compare it to what they were actually wearing. A lot of the times you'll find it's actually false. Yep. Or if you meet somebody for the first time and you're like, oh, they had red hair, and then you meet you actually go to meet them again and it's oh, they actually had blonde hair. If you pay attention to your memories often, They are not complete. And it's because when you form a memory, like something happens and then you remember, but you only remember fragments of it, and then your mind just fills in the rest of it with incorrect
say
information
you're like,
a lot of the time.
I'm looking for a guy in this parking lot. Then you would be on the lookout and you'd be trying to purposefully pay attention to the features. But she just happened to see a guy in the parking lot and she wasn't really on the lookout for it.
She wasn't like trying to imprint it in her mind.
Yes. So she was like, a guy, and like took in some information, but it's, so.
And like she did remember the hoodie and the glasses, and that's correct.
Yeah.
But she was completely, and the thing with like your own memories is it's not that you're like, oh, I don't remember what his hair was. Maybe it's you think you remember it and you think that you know what it is, but in reality, it's not that.
Right.
And a lot of people have been convicted on eyewitness testimony because for a long time we really did think it was very reliable. And that's all we had. But it's been found, and with once DNA came into play, it has exonerated a lot of people who were put away with eyewitness testimony. Right. So eyewitness testimony is a helpful piece of evidence, but it should never be relied on as the main piece of evidence, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinions.
Agreed.
So that's interesting. That's what I wanted to talk about in the intro, but I didn't remember.
Oh.
But again, it's my whole thing on forensics. Like, let's be skeptical of the forensics always. And also, as a bigger thing, like I do think a lot of these cases that we talk about on podcasts or on whatever, anything, like if you're talking about, people who are like, oh, I remember Ted from like when we were 5 years old. Like I just take these things.
Do you remember, or are
such a grain of salt,
basing it on what he later became?
Exactly, because these people, like, they grew up with this guy, they never knew anything, they never thought anything of it. Then they find out he's a Unabomber, so then they bring up all these memories, and it's like you're filling in so much shit with
the person we know that turned out to be a murderer. We remember lots of details.
I remember that fucking guy.
Yes.
You know who you are.
Just saying. Maybe if he ends up getting convicted, we will be talking about it, right?
Yeah. Depends how long he goes away for. He's in Canada, so
yeah.
Be like
That's
5
true.
days.
That's true.
Anyway, so that sketch went out, and that was blasted everywhere. And Ted was pretty happy about that because it had his hair colors incorrect.
Yeah.
Not that like anybody ever saw him.
And he's like, note to self: don't wear a hoodie again.
Yeah. So at this point, the search for the Unabomber had become the biggest and most expensive search in FBI history up to that point. 6 years would go by before another bomb. So here we see another pretty significant
What was he doing?
Period.
6
Experimenting.
years?
And also, I think he was probably spooked because there had been an eyewitness. And so, like, everyone was going, like, that picture was up everywhere.
And he didn't want to be caught.
Yeah, he did not want to be caught.
6 years is a long fucking time.
But it also indicates, like, a very careful, methodical killer.
Yeah.
Someone who doesn't want to get caught, a little bit like BTK.
He is
and
that.
As we have learned, like, it's rare for serial killers to do that. Bit of a loser like BTK. Yes, quite a bit of a loser.
No collaging, though?
No, he wasn't big into art. No. He made bombs. That was his art.
And, like, codes.
He wrote a lot.
How old was he at this point?
I believe he was born in 1942. And before the 6 years, that was 87. So okay. 42 to 87. What is that? 45 years old?
Pretty mature.
Was it 42?
I love how I cannot do math at all.
No, well, it's like so much pressure. Yeah, it was more.
It's so much pressure
on camera. Like,
no, you're right. I am serious.
No,
it is
really embarrassing. I tried so hard at that.
No, I think you got it right.
I did. But yeah, so he's an older guy, like, and typically it's like the younger guys who are much more impulsive or whatever. Right. He's in his 40s. Like, he has taken his time. He's a methodical guy. He's spending his time writing and stuff. And like, I feel that these bigger gaps was like him trying to perfect his bombs and his writings as well.
God, 6 years by yourself in a cabin, like, I would be so deranged.
17 years.
Yeah.
Myself. And he loved it. Right. Like, that was his, not to say that he loved it, but that was, he didn't like people.
Yeah.
Some people do well in situations like that. Like, there's some people
he was doing well.
No, not well. But like, some people, it's like that's their preferred way to be. Like, they don't like talking to people. They're introverted. Like, you like talking to people.
Yeah, that's true.
This man did not like talking to people.
Okay.
He liked ranting at people.
See, but that's what I like as well.
Fair.
Okay, go
So bomb number 13 was June 22nd, 1993 in Tiburon, California.
Okay.
It was mailed to the home of Charles Epstein, a very prominent geneticist who made huge discoveries in the study of Down syndrome.
Oh.
And Dr. Epstein lost his eardrums and his fingers to the bombs, and that's when everyone discovered that that the Unabomber was back.
Eardrums? Like just from the sound of, oh my God.
Ted would later say that the computer laboratories were useful targets for this cause because they were sort of cutting edge they were the cutting edge of the system's progress, which he wanted to halt. And then also he was really against genetic engineering. So that's why he would go after geneticists.
Remember when computers were like a new cool thing?
Yeah, like, ooh, a computer store. Like,
When we were kids, like computer, it was like, oh.
Yeah, and now it's like, oof, we've way surpassed that.
Yep.
And then it was only 2 days later.
I wonder if Ted is pissed.
Pissed about what?
That fact that like technology has advanced so much.
Oh, I know, like now?
Because at that point it was like technology was advancing and then now it's like so
Exploded.
much more.
But it's like, I wonder like how much he pays attention to that. Yeah, it's hard to know. And I think a lot of people who like read his manifesto were like, see, it's all coming true, and like are, because basically he said like it's going to advance.
Yeah, wait till the robots
rapidly,
take over.
whatever.
It's not that far away.
Pardon me?
Wait till the robots take over.
Well, exactly. And like that's, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's possible that he's sitting there being like, see, I fucking told you.
Yeah, probably. And he's kind of right. Still shouldn't have sent these bombs though.
Yeah. Bomb number 14 was 2 days later, on June 24th, 1993, at Yale University in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And this was mailed to David Gelernter.
So he just got right back into it.
Yeah, like hard.
Wow.
And he was a computer professor at Yale, obviously computers. He opened the package in his office, and when it exploded, he was injured, but he was not killed.
Okay.
The FBI immediately got right back to work. They'd never stopped things, but had definitely slowed down in the 6-year hiatus. Yeah. The new bombs were more sophisticated. He was using a chlorate mixture, which no longer required a pipe to contain it. And obviously, like, it was like one was 2 days after the other, so they're like scrambling.
So he had really improved the sophistication of his bombs then.
Yes. And
wow.
Undoubtedly, he was experimenting with them in the 6 years. Bomb 15 was sent to an advertising executive named Thomas Mosser. So that's probably what you're talking about. And he was killed by the bomb in his kitchen. So just sad. After his wife and daughter had left the room, he opened the bomb. So it's
sad.
Very lucky that they were not present, because they would have also been killed.
Hearing this, it's like, now, in retrospect, us opening up Ben's package.
A little risky.
Well, yeah. Yeah, a little bit.
It was fine, though.
Yeah, it worked out.
And like, aren't you glad that we opened it before
yes.
this episode? Because otherwise you would have been scared.
It would just be closed forever.
Yeah. Just like, this is a nice package to just look at.
Yeah.
So then the New York Times, this is where it gets interesting.
Okay.
The New York Times received a letter coming from someone taking responsibility for the bombings. So that letter said, quote, "We are an anarchist group calling ourselves FC." So that's what the little metal pieces were. Notice that the postmark on this envelope precedes a newsworthy event that will happen about the time you receive this letter, if nothing goes wrong. This will prove that we know about the event in advance, so our claim of responsibility is truthful. Ask the FBI about FC. They have heard of us. We will give information about our goals at some future time. Right now, we only want to establish our identity and prove an identifying number that will ensure the authenticity of any future communications from us. Keep this number secret so that no one else can pretend to speak in our name. If we recall, a bunch of bombs had pieces of metal with FC sketched into them. So that no one else can pretend to speak our name, end quote.
So, very BTK.
Yes. But also, so that FC thing was like him planting that a long time ago, knowing that he would later pose as he was trying to say that we're a group.
Yeah.
Right? And everything going forward, he's saying, we are doing this, we are doing this. And at the time, there was a lot of like big environmentalist, anarchist groups. So he was basically trying to say that he was one of them.
Right.
And Ted did actually sympathize with these type of groups who were like chaining themselves to trees and like trying to stop loggers or whatever.
That's kind of his vibe, except murderier.
Yeah. He's just taking it way farther.
Yeah, and he's just not really peaceful.
These people were not peaceful either.
No. The Chain to Trees
there's a
people?
lot of different environmentalist groups, but I think those ones that he specifically identified with, like there was one called Earth First that was interviewed in the documentary, and they would there was this one video of them like chaining this like 85-year-old lady to the back of a logger truck, and like they had like set fire to buildings and stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, they were causing damage. They weren't like outright like killing people like this,
right? But they were still
that
causing
bad.
damage.
But they were causing damage. They were causing destruction. Some people, I'm sure, think that's like super justified. It's
pretty fucked up, like how, you know, cutting down the rainforest and all of that. It's not cool.
Yeah, it's something I'd have to think about a little bit harder to decide where I come down on that.
Yeah,
but I don't know. I think a lot of that stuff starts to get into like a very mob mentality, and
yeah,
it's like a very fine line between like an actual justified cause, and then it's like we're burning this town down, you know?
Yeah, I don't think any of that stuff is right. I just think it's one of those things where the corporate interests are so big that it's going to be hard to make a difference as a little group.
Exactly, and that's why Ted felt like he
Better.
needed to, like, you can't make. He basically was like, you can't make a difference unless you're like destroying things and killing people.
Yeah, like you still can't make a difference doing that, but okay.
So in 1995, the FBI released a profile that they had come up with. I believe there were multiple profilers involved in the case over the years, but obviously our boy JD, John Douglas, a legendary profiler.
Oh, he's part of this.
Was one of them, of course.
Of course.
Legendary
Was
profiler.
he busy making love to his wife while he was about to write this?
Probably. Okay. The profile that they released to the public said that the bomber is most likely a white male between the ages of 35 and 45.
Okay.
Who is at least
JD said this?
Yeah, of like among others.
Okay.
Who is at least comfortable on a university campus, if not worked or works at one.
Wow, very good.
They were pretty confident that the Unabomber had been raised in Chicago and later lived in Salt Lake City and San Francisco and the San Francisco area. Is true.
Wow.
They had a hard time guessing his occupation and had theories.
None.
Yeah, that's why it was hard. Right? They had theories ranging from aircraft mechanic to scientist.
Mom donating money.
Yeah. Stay-at-home dad. In 1995, the Unabomber sent a 3-page letter to the New York Times taking credit for all the bombings and telling them that he would only stop if major publications printed his manuscript. And he used like we.
Was it the Manifesto?
So, no. So it was a 3-page letter, and he was saying that he would only stop if they published his manuscript, which was his manifesto.
Okay.
And that he would be sending it soon. In the letter, he still says that he's a group of people known as FC. And some people mention the name Freedom Club later, which is what he was trying to make himself sound.
But he didn't officially call it that?
No, he always went by FC. The last bomb, number 16, occurred on April 26, 1995.
Okay.
And this was sent to Gilbert Murray. So Gilbert Murray opened it. He was the president of and lobbyist for the California Forestry Association. So Gilbert Murray was president of the California Forestry Association and a well-known capital lobbyist for the timber industry.
Okay.
So, like logging.
Right. Misleading name.
Yeah. And he was the third person to be killed by the Unabomber.
So sad.
Unfortunately. But apparently what's interesting is the package was not addressed to Murray, but it was addressed to a retired executive who had had the role up until a year before he retired. So, like, I think maybe Ted just had outdated information and sent it to who he thought was in that role, but it was obviously Murray. So that's not crazy, but...
And it wasn't necessarily personal so much as it was to the person in that role.
Exactly. Yeah. Then the New York Times got another letter warning that the Unabomber was going to attack a flight out of LA. The FBI got called in and they determined that this letter was real and it was from the actual Unabomber. So the New York Times decided to print that information. So then the airlines got all spooked and they threatened to stop carrying packages altogether, which really put pressure on the FBI to solve this shit because that would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
So everyone was on edge.
Ted was probably so happy he was having such an impact.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think he was, at this point, he was like living.
He was living.
He was just fucking living. So yeah, everyone was on edge. Newspapers were printing daily articles talking about the Unabomber and his writings and his
he loved
anti-technology theories. Like everyone was like, "Who is this guy? What is like?" He was really terrorizing the United States.
I mean, this is scary.
It's terrifying because you have no idea what like who is going to open a package and be bombed, or like what airline, like what plane it's going to be on.
If it was in this day and age when we're just ordering packages constantly,
it would be horrifying.
Yeah.
I'm like, what would I do? In June of 1995, the Unabomber sent out 5 copies of his 35,000-word essay, which we now know as Ted's Manifesto, entitled Industrial Society and Its Future, and he demanded it be printed. Of course, he
worked really hard on it.
He did. And because like he didn't have like a computer or a photocopier, so he like hand typed on a typewriter 5 separate copies and mailed them.
I mean, he has nothing but time.
Yeah. And he has no technology to actually efficiently
Was he like,
out.
Wow, fuck, maybe I should invest in a computer.
Maybe I should get like a photocopier.
Typewriters are pretty cool, though. Not gonna lie.
They're really loud.
Yeah, but it's like cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
Like pressing each key is like satisfying.
It's true. But like try to backspace on that.
Yeah. What do you do if you make a mistake? Start again.
White out it. You white it out.
Oh, that's not that bad.
It's like
imagine you have to start over every time you make a mistake.
Have you seen a delete button?
Yeah.
On a computer?
Some things aren't so bad.
So there was, of course, a lot of debate within the task force as to like whether or not they should publish it. Mm-hmm. And so they just like for a long they like fought, and they were like, okay, let's not publish it. And then they were like, no, we have to.
Oh.
They decided to go for it in hopes that somebody who knew their unsub would recognize the writing and rat on him. And they're like, we have nothing else to go on. We need to we have 35,000 words. Somebody's going to recognize that. That's
pretty smart.
Yeah, and it worked.
Yeah, okay.
The FBI, so on September 19th, 1995, the Washington Post printed the manifesto. Mm-hmm. Many people read it. Many people loved it. Many people hated it.
Kind of cool, yeah, it's kind of good.
It was mostly the environmentalists and some academics who really liked it. Yeah. The FBI, unsurprisingly, got a lot of tips from people who thought they knew who the Unabomber was, but only one man stood out among them.
Okay, who was the man?
Well, we're going to rewind a little bit.
Okay.
So, we're going to learn a little bit about Ted's brother at this point.
Okay.
So, Ted's brother, David, had been living his life, minding his own biz.
Vibing at the factory.
Yeah. He lived a pretty rural life. He didn't have much to do with technology himself. Like, he was not, obviously, to the extent that Ted was, like, anti anything. But, like, he was a country guy who didn't, do much in technology. And it was the 90s, so, like, there wasn't a whole lot available compared to now. Mm-hmm. And so David had met a woman named Linda, and they decided to get married. La-di-da. Fun. That's for good. Them.
David didn't have that hospital stint, so he turned out pretty normal.
He was a normal, I've seen him interviewed. He seems like a lovely man.
And what about his IQ? He had like a normal IQ.
He was very intelligent.
Okay.
But not like 167, not like Ted. So he and Linda decided to get married. Ted did not like Linda, not one bit.
Aww.
And he felt that Linda was changing David, and that because of her, he had just adopted this like mainstream middle class way of life.
He was being too much of a normie.
Yeah. And Ted didn't like that. So Ted made a huge deal about this. He threw a huge hissy fit. He wouldn't come to the wedding. He decided that he would cut off his mom and brother after all this. He wrote a scathing letter. Dude,
you need your mom. Who else is going to fund you?
I think at that point he just like started getting decrepit and like, I don't know. And I don't know if his mom was still mailing him money. I think at this point too, also, I don't know when it was, but his father got cancer and then committed suicide. So he didn't have a dad. The mom was like beside herself.
They probably weren't in touch that much, I'm assuming.
No, well, he decided after that, he's like, I'm not talking to you guys anymore.
Right. So sad.
He wrote this huge nasty letter, which apparently had some horrible things about Linda in it.
Surprised it wasn't a poem.
Yeah, well, she was like, it was so awful.
Aw.
Upon witnessing this huge meltdown, Linda was like, hey, you guys, like, Ted seems to be suffering from some mental health issues, don't you think?
Yeah.
And David was like, what? No, he's just an eccentric genius. And Linda was like, no, he's mentally ill.
Yeah.
Very obviously.
Guys.
And David was like, he's like, this was the first time anyone's ever suggested that. Like they were like, what?
Like, you know, when you're in a family and you just think things are normal, and then it takes an outside perspective to like.
And I think that's exactly what it was. It's like they grew up with Ted his entire life, and he like, you know, he didn't just like
weirdo
snap into being a crazy man in the woods. Like he slowly, and it was always like Ted's a genius. He's a genius. So like obviously being a genius makes you weird.
He's not going to be
like,
normal,
recluse. And she's like, look at what he's writing. Like this is not normal.
Jesus Christ. Do you know what he was writing? Like, do you know the contents
I don't know
what
was in the letter, but she's described it as like just like really awful and like.
And he kind of had like a hatred towards women, right? Because he was an incel.
I think so. I think that must have been the case. There's no way you like go your whole life without having sex with women and like don't start to resent them.
Right.
So I'm sure that was also a part of it.
Okay.
Anyway, so they all started living their lives separately because Ted didn't want to see or talk to them. I think he did have a little bit of interaction with them or whatever. He didn't cut them off entirely at that point. David and his mother were super worried about Ted, and they talked about him all the time.
Nice.
They wanted to respect his wishes and like leave him alone, but also like they loved him and they were super worried about him.
And his mom's like, fuck, I shouldn't have left him in the hospital.
Yeah, I feel so bad. She probably felt awful.
Yeah. And if she hadn't done that, like, maybe he wouldn't have turned out this way.
Absolutely. Maybe he wouldn't be like crave isolation.
Maybe he would just be like this genius that helps like nature groups.
Maybe he would have just been a normal environmentalist who's like crazy but doesn't hurt anyone.
But smart and like, okay.
And so then it wasn't until 1994 when Thomas Mosser was killed that David and Linda even heard about the Unabomber.
So they just hadn't been hearing about it this whole time.
They literally they were like quite an isolated family, not obviously again not like Ted level, but to the level that they didn't hear about the Unabomber until 1994, which is pretty crazy.
That is crazy. Okay.
And as I said before, in 1995, the newspapers were constantly writing about the Unabomber and about his anti-industrial leanings. And I suppose probably there was some opinion pieces and some investigative stuff, and just it was a lot of Unabomber stuff. And so Linda started to become interested in it, and she started reading more and more about what the Unabomber was thinking and all that kind of stuff. And she started to think like, God, that sounds a lot like someone I know.
Linda's smart.
Linda fucking
smart bitch.
Cracked this case, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So eventually, she gathered up enough courage to breach the topic with David. And she was like, David, I think your brother is the Unabomber.
Holy shit.
And David was like, no.
I didn't know it was Linda.
Yeah, it was Linda.
Wow, okay, go Linda.
And David was like, no, there's no way. Like, he would not entertain the theory. He was like, no, like, you're crazy.
Oh, naive David.
Oh, hold on. I just need to plug my computer in.
I like when he's like, oh, Ted's just a genius.
He's just an eccentric genius. Like,
no, bro.
No, he's got schizophrenia, man.
Yeah, Ted has like major issues, man.
And especially when it's your older brother, you know? Like, you never think, I don't know, I don't have an older brother. I assume my siblings just think I'm an eccentric genius. So
definitely.
You just think like,
for sure.
The best.
That's funny.
So then when the Manifesto came out, that's when Linda was like, we got to get the Manifesto. And they described it too, because again, they lived very isolatedly. So like the Manifesto came out and everyone wanted to read it. And they're like, they had to go to the library. And she's like, there was only 6 copies and they were all gone. and so then David was like, so then I decided we got to use the internet. And so they like went to the library to like use the internet. And they're like,
I wonder if Ted was happy or pissed that his stuff was on the internet. It's like more people are going to see it, but also technology.
You can't avoid technology, and like that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when the Manifesto came out and they read it, they were like, oh shit, like this does sound quite a bit like Ted.
Yeah, sounds like Ted.
David had been at his mother's house and had found what really was an old version of the Manifesto. So like from the 70s.
And so Ted wrote it when he was like a kid?
Yeah, like he had obviously been perfecting this manifesto for a long time.
Yeah, shit.
And so it was very clear that Ted had written in the 70s this manifesto, and that it was like the same writer. So poor David was super torn.
Yeah, it's his brother.
Either he goes to the FBI and turns in his brother, whom he swore to his mother he would never abandon, or he leaves it and waits for the Unabomber to kill another person.
Yeah, that's...
Like, how awful.
That's a hard choice. I guess he didn't really think about, like, should I go to Ted and ask him what's up? Because Ted's not really talking to him.
No. And so David chose to contact the FBI.
Yeah, I mean, good choice, to be honest.
David Kaczynski called them to tell them about his brother Ted, who'd grown up in Chicago, who taught at Berkeley, who lived for a time in Salt Lake City.
Genius.
David also provided letters that Ted had written, and the FBI's linguistic analysts determined that it was very likely that the author of those letters and the manifesto were the same person.
They were.
Now, apparently, and this is something I remember from a long time ago, but it didn't come up at all in that documentary. But one of the key phrases that was often talked about was the Unabomber's use of the phrase, eat your cake and have it too.
Oh.
Which is the opposite of the more common phrase, have your cake and eat it too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
And he knew that, like, David knew that Ted had always used the phrase, you can't have your cake and eat it too, which he claimed rightly was the actually correct way of saying that phrase. So that was, like, a big factor. So after speaking with David and getting information about Ted that matched up with their theories on the Unabomber, they had enough for a search warrant. Before they went to his cabin, however, they called up old Butch Garrick, if we recall, the sawmill operator who Ted sanded his equipment. And so they asked Butch to take some video footage of the area before they swarmed it. And they were like, we think he's a Unabomber. And so he did, and that was great. And then I think word started to get out before they were really ready to go. And so, like, media started going out to Montana, out to Lincoln or whatever. And so then they were like, okay, we got to execute the search warrant now. So they
But
went
Ted
in.
didn't know yet.
No.
Okay.
They surprised him. I was like, 3 guys started walking up and they're like, hey, is anyone home? And he looked out and they just, like, looked like regular guys. And then so, like, I guess he opened the door and like 78 officers, like, swarmed.
I've seen the photos of him being taken out of his cabin.
Yes, and I've got some footage of that.
Looking, what's the word you used?
Disgusting.
Decrepit.
Very decrepit. He was, like, caked in dirt.
Yeah. Like, he must, I mean, honestly, you live alone for a couple weeks, you kind of give up on hygiene. Like, 17 years. Let's see this footage.
It was on April 3rd, I'll just say the date that it was, April 3rd, 1996, that they...
Pretty recent, man.
Yeah.
We were 3.
In our lifetime. And here is some footage. I'll play it.
After a 17-year search for the elusive terrorist that became known as the Unabomber, short for University and Airline Bomber, FBI agents finally closed in on their reclusive prey, Ted Kaczynski.
It's crazy how he, like, just, like, you know, when you think of somebody who's, like, a crazy homeless person, it's just, you don't think of somebody who, like, is a genius and was a professor, and, like, he could have lived on such a different timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm sure all the people who knew him were like, yeah, you know, Ted was kind of a weird guy, and then seeing what he became.
Yeah.
Wow.
When people were, like, shocked. And
That's
I'll get
shocking.
into that. But so in the cabin, they found his extensive diary consisting of about 40,000 handwritten pages, bunch of bomb making stuff, 1 live bomb ready to be mailed.
Wow.
So I think after seeing that, David was like, okay, I made a
Thank
good call.
God, yeah.
His cabin was tiny and absolutely full of stuff. Here's some footage of the cabin when they found it, and FBI agent Terry Turchi describing the scene.
Okay.
I was with another agent, Pat Webb. Pat was an explosives agent. So we kind of opened the door just a bit to the cabin. And as we opened the door, we were both pretty much overcome. As we looked across the cabin at the shelves that were built on the other side of the door, we could see coffee cans and bottles and jars, and they all had labels on them, and they were very meticulously done. And we could see that some were labeled with the name of certain chemicals. One of the things we saw was a hooded sweatshirt, that was hanging up there. And the cabin smelled as if you might start to think, if you really think about this. This is a person who lived in this cabin, had a cutaway spot in the floor to go to the bathroom in if he needed to, and had built fires in the cabin. There was an old potbelly stove in there. So the smell of smoke was in everything. Pat Webb turns to me and he has tears in his eyes and one running down his cheek. And he said, this is it. We found the Unabomber. At long last, this is over.
I mean, you guys didn't really find him, but okay. Yeah.
It
Good
was
job,
Linda.
man.
It was all Linda.
Yeah. I always thought it was all David. It was all Linda. Because I'm pretty sure I had heard, like, David read the thing and was like, yeah, that sounds like Ted, but
Only after she was
it
like,
was all
hey.
Linda.
And she had
Shout
never
out
met
Linda.
Ted. She had never met him.
Yeah.
She hadn't spoken on the phone with him.
She just knew what a douche he was.
She knew like how his family had described him. She had read letters that he sent and like read, you know, a lot of his writings or whatever.
Wow.
And yeah, it was her.
That's crazy. Smart lady.
So yeah, in there they found bombs, bomb parts, homemade guns, the famous hoodie and aviator sunglasses, the typewriter, everything. Neighbors were shocked. And everybody else who ever knew him. Everyone knew Ted as a quiet recluse who barely came out of his home, who never caused any issue for anyone, who never made any trouble. Ted kept a diary all through the years, and in it he wrote about everything, what he did day to day, his thoughts, his opinions on everything, his own personal history, and also about his bomb crafting and his hopes for how many people he would kill, as I've spoken about extensively, but that was all there. Some pages, and as I said, there was like the code. It just looked like grids of numbers, and then you had to decipher the codes. But in all those codes, it was like his like straight up confessions of what he did.
Right.
The media would not leave Ted's family alone. They stood outside their homes and badgered them.
That's annoying.
Which was, of course, super upsetting for them.
Yeah, it's not really their fault. You can argue like his mom shouldn't have left him or whatever, but that like she didn't know.
You can't blame someone for that. But it was horrifying for them and the mother, of course. Ted was taken away. They attempted to interrogate him, which of course was useless, and then they charged him with 3 counts of
useless
murders.
Just because they just didn't need to.
Well, they had all the evidence, but also he just wouldn't cooperate.
Yeah, they didn't need him to. They didn't need to pry. Like we have the evidence.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. But what I meant there was just like he was like,
no,
I was not going to cooperate with them.
Okay.
Like I was not going to answer the questions.
Okay.
So yeah, and that's where I'm going to end part 2.
Wow.
And in part 3, we will get into the trial, the aftermath, and we'll discuss the actual manifesto.
Okay.
So that's that.
That's a crazy story.
It's insane. Like I can't imagine living through that. Obviously we were too young at the time to like know that was happening and pay attention, but like this is something that just gripped the entire country. Yeah. It was terrifying. And it was like straight up hardcore terrorism. Yeah.
It's a different type of serial killer.
Yeah. And I would say I would more call this person a terrorist.
Right.
And I think, it's quite a classic terrorist, like somebody with like an extreme perspective or point of view that, feels like they're right. And I feel like a lot of terrorists like come from like a hurt place or like they feel like they've been like attacked. Like Ted felt
interesting.
Like he's like, I felt like I was just trying to live my life and trying to live on my own, but like I couldn't escape the technology.
Right.
And like, so I had to do this, blah, blah, blah. I think that's very classic, like terrorist psychology.
Yeah.
And terrorism is horrifying.
It really is.
It's so scary. It hurts. It has the ability to hurt so many people and, be terrifying like in the name.
Yeah. I mean, Ted is a scary person. It's just crazy to me how like, I feel like a part of him is this like capable human.
Yes.
And that's so sad.
And if you watch that documentary that I've been talking about, the Unabomber in his own words.
Yeah.
The way he speaks like a normal guy.
That's the thing. It's like you're almost normal. Like you almost could have just like not gone down this road.
And even like he talks like when he's being interviewed, he's like, yeah, that's what I did. And like I felt blah, blah, blah. Like he sounds like a happy guy.
Yeah, he's
like,
not creepy. Like
he looks like he'd be like, I am the Unabomber.
Yeah,
blah, blah,
I've
like,
never watched his interviews. I would like to.
Like
but like even BTK is like, I murdered her. And like it comes across so creepy. But Ted's just like, hey, I'm just a nerd,
He's like, hey, that's what I thought, and that's what I did.
Yeah.
And he's very like, blatant. He's like, I didn't care about them. I wanted to kill them.
Yeah.
He's like, and he specifically says like, I had selfish reasons. I wanted to live on my own. I wanted to like, I wanted people to leave me alone, and they wouldn't.
But even that is not as creepy sounding.
Exactly. It's not like, it's different than like the really fucked up creepy thing is about like PTK is like he like got off on like feeling the life like leave a person. Right. That's like creepy on like a visceral horrific level. Like
creepy.
I would not be afraid like it's not that you feel like being in a room with Ted Kaczynski. Yeah. like if you sit next to him, he's not going to strangle you to death. Right. That's not the scary part about him. It's not like a one-on-one individual scary thing, Yeah.
He's scary because he almost seems normal also.
Yeah, and that's another part about it.
Yeah.
So I am losing my voice. Like my throat is On the ends,
So we'll wrap it up.
I had a cocktail competition yesterday with some of my friends.
What's a cocktail competition?
We each made a different cocktail, like 4 versions of it, and then
to see whose is better.
Yeah.
Did you win?
We actually didn't have a winner, but Taylor, shout out.
Not much of a competition.
Taylor's was really bad. It was literally undrinkable.
Taylor's was really bad.
Had way too much white rum.
What was yours?
Mine was a watermelon mojito.
That actually sounds pretty good.
No. Watermelon margarita.
Okay.
Was a mojito.
Even better. Margaritas are
with
good.
You know that like spicy lime chili stuff as the
Tahini?
rim? Yeah.
I love tahini.
Was, in my opinion, delicious.
You should have just made a bee's knees.
I thought about it.
The best mixed drink in the world.
I thought about it, but I wanted to make something more exciting. But anyway, tell us what you think. But look out for next week when we'll we'll really get our opinions out on that one.
Yeah.
Instagram at whosknockingpodcast.com, Twitter at whosknockingpod. Email us hello@whosknockingpodcast.com. Stay safe out there because you never know
who's knocking.
This podcast is produced in collaboration with Lost Line Media. Artwork by August Digital. Music by Matthew Cook.